So I want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to learn more about host site recruitment, or I should say member recruitment. You've all been awarded Community Corps members for our 23-24 term. We're so excited to have you all with us, and hopefully you will all be successful at finding members just so that you can get the important work done at your host sites. If you're curious to know or how many host sites have been accepted and how many member slots, we actually have over 55 approved host sites, which is a pretty big number for us. And we're still accepting host sites. Some are still trickling in yet, but of those 55, 16 are new host sites. So we love to see new organizations jumping in and joining our AmeriCorps program. But that also means that 2/3 of our sites are returning and have hosted AmeriCorps members in the past. So they see value in our program, and we so appreciate the partnerships and excited that you are continuing on with us. What I'm going to do today is go through some of the materials that I sent, talk about member recruitment, and then open it up for some questions at the end and hopefully make you feel more comfortable about member recruitment because we have just over 3 months until the recruitment deadline of August 16th. So you all should have received our recruitment materials, which this year we sent out through a link, which took you to our new website. There's a little screenshot of what that website looks like on the right. Um, but before I dive into these materials, if you haven't or you weren't able to access these materials, we did find out a few sites weren't able to initially, please reach out to me or one of the staff members, and we'll be happy to email you these materials. Because our new site is new, we were working through some security issues and trying to get all of the kinks worked out with launching a new website. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you aren't or weren't able to access these materials yet. But the most important material is that member application link. That is the link that all members will need to apply through. That doesn't mean they have to apply through that first. They can apply through any means at your host site if you have a different application process. But at some point, the AmeriCorps member will need to apply through our member application. And that could be even after they've been selected, but we'll kind of coach you through that process when we get to that point. So that application link is important to have. And then the other document is just a general overview of the recruitment process. So you'll find some guidance materials on how and who you might want to be selecting for a member. And then we also go over some recruitment ideas or strategies, and then talk about what Marshfield Clinic is going to be doing to help you all with recruitment. Other important documents are the Civil Rights and Non-Harassment Policy and the Public Notice of Non-Discrimination, just important for you to keep in mind when you're interviewing and selecting candidates. And then lastly, there are editable recruitment flyers. There's 3 different flyers, each for each position type. So a full-time flyer, 3/4 time flyer, and half-time flyer. So you can feel free to edit those and add more detail specific to your position that your host site is offering. Important costs that I do want to point out, not necessarily that related to member recruitment, but these member living stipend amounts are on the flyers, but these are important numbers that you'll want to have when you're interviewing candidates. If they're asking, how much do I get paid? Here are the 3 different living stipend amounts, and they are paid biweekly. So sometimes it's helpful to know that biweekly gross pay. And again, these are all listed out on those flyers for each of those position types. That's the living stipend. That cost is completely covered by Marshfield Clinic. We take care of that payment through our payroll system. The other cost that hopefully you're aware of, but is the $5,000 host site cash match payment. The amounts are less if you have a 3/4 time or half-time member. Those are listed there. But that payment is not going to be due until after your member begins their service. You have 60 days to pay that host site payment. So just some numbers to keep in mind as we are talking about member recruitment and once the fall hits, when to expect that your host site will be invoiced for your members. And at any point, if there's questions, feel free to put them in the chat, interrupt me and come off mute if it's pertinent while I'm going through the information. Otherwise, like I said, we'll have time at the end for questions. So here's a list of all the different strategies that we are going to be doing to help you all find members. So we create a general job description and a general posting that we post on our Marshall Clinic employment page. We post that posting on the AmeriCorps website. So if someone's just looking for an AmeriCorps position, they can apply through that site and it'll funnel through to us. We also work with our HR department to post on some external employment websites like an Indeed or Career Builder. It just depends on what our HR decides to do for those postings. And then we also do a social media campaign. So that's posted on our Facebook, Instagram, and also LinkedIn. So you'll keep an eye out for those postings and any specific posting or application that we get through any of these methods. We take a look at that application and then we forward it on to applicable host sites. So if a member is interested in a specific area or interest, or they live in a specific geographic region, we will direct it to any appropriate host site and then let you decide if you are wanting to interview that candidate or what the next step would be. And then something that's entirely new this year is we are going to be facilitating and helping host sites put postings directly on the AmeriCorps Handshake page. And if you're not familiar with Handshake, it's a very popular job posting site for college students. And I have a slide coming up that will give more specifics on that. So we are going to be posting your individual specific positions that you write up. You get to put the description and any qualifications right in the post. And then our staff member Sophie manages these postings for us. She posts them to the Handshake account and take care of any applicants that come in. But really, they're going to be applying through our AmeriCorps application process, and then they'll get filtered back to you. But the Handshake account gets posted to school, or Handshake postings get posted across the Midwest to different schools. I have a Handshake account and I've already seen some of the posts that you have already submitted. So there's two examples at the bottom of the slide here of what they would look like if someone's searching for an AmeriCorps position. So you can be a little bit more specific to your host site and the needs of what you're looking for in a member. A common question we've gotten so far is if you have multiple members that you're searching or recruiting for at your host site, you will just want to submit one posting per your organization and not necessarily multiple posts for multiple positions, but you could say, recruiting for 4 positions and then list the different position descriptions or types if the roles will be different. So we're really excited about this opportunity. Already seeing a lot of traction coming through the positions that we have posted. So on that recruitment website, there is a link to a Google form. All you need to do as a host site is submit that Google form, which you'll just put the position description and some information in about your position. And then Sophie will take it from there and get it posted on the AmeriCorps Handshake page.
And I'll just jump in, this is optional, And what if you already have a Handshake account, or maybe you already even put a posting out there? Just increase your visibility by also putting it on the AmeriCorps Handshake. So it isn't redundant to have two postings because people will find them in different ways.
Great point, Shelley. And the more visibility, the better. And this goes too with our Marshall Clinic postings. I mentioned that we may be posting on Indeed or Career Builder, depending on what our HR decides to do. But that doesn't mean that you can't and you shouldn't post on those sites as well, depending on what your organization decides to do, just because our postings are more generic. So we're searching for community health, public health related individuals, not necessarily a specific goal or activities that your host site has. So it is helpful to also post your positions there as well.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat as well. So
Right.
Lynn's question, how do we submit a Handshake post that is already on Handshake, or do we need to?
I think that was related to what Shelley was mentioning. So it doesn't hurt to also submit your Handshake post through our site or through the AmeriCorps site, because like Shelley said, you just might reach a different audience depending on what they type in the search bar, if they're searching for AmeriCorps positions or if they're searching for, say, pantry coordinator or a specific activity. So it wouldn't hurt to do both, but you also don't have to. It's completely optional. We're just offering this as another tool in the toolbox for finding your member.
And then question from Angela. I noticed the internship notation with the Handshake listings. Is it recommended to market these positions as internships?
Great question. And I believe this is specific to Handshake and just the different opportunities of how we can post the positions because they're not considered jobs. So how Handshake categorizes them as internships. But it's completely up to you and your host site how you best would feel that would attract the best candidate. So some host sites will target students and sometimes it can be beneficial to list it as an internship, especially if you're planning on having the member complete an internship while serving as an AmeriCorps member. But really the word internship just helps draw in that person that's looking for like a position to help build their career or something that's not permanent. I don't know if Sophie, if you have any other insight to add about the Handshake internship category.
Yeah, I was actually just going to add that we received guidance from the folks with AmeriCorps that have been working directly with Handshake, and they advised that internship was the category that we use. So like Megan said, in other situations might not be best to market it as an internship, but in the world of Handshake, they advised us to use that category.
Thanks, Sophie, and great questions. Is there any other questions before we move on? All right. So if you've already started recruitment, that's awesome. But maybe you haven't done anything yet, and that's okay. But now would be the time to start thinking about and building your recruitment plan. So these are the 5 steps that you'll have to sort of think about and kind of think of how you want to tackle these different areas. But first step is coming up with a plan and then marketing or posting your position, having a process for screening your applicants, interviewing them, and then finally how you're going to be making a selection, who's going to be making that decision. So these are the different steps that you'll need to start planning for and thinking about. And so part of this planning process, you'll want to finalize member duties and logistics. You all submitted what your member or members will be doing in your host site application, but maybe you want to put in more detail add more specifics about what the member will be doing on a day-to-day basis. Think about who's truly going to be their supervisor. Maybe that's changed since you submitted your application. Getting these details sort of straightened out, especially as we are getting closer and closer to that application due date. And when you start interviewing and selecting candidates, they're going to have these questions. So you want to make sure you have a good, solid plan so that your member is super impressed when they interview and get really excited to start and serve at your host site. So once you have those details narrowed down, you'll want to work on your actual posting. When you're crafting that posting or any sort of social media or marketing, you'll want to make sure you highlight the tangible benefits, which of course are the living stipend and the education award, health insurance, but also those intangible benefits, because AmeriCorps members are generally not in it for the money. They're in it for the experience, for the the goal of helping others, impacting their community. So don't be afraid to list those benefits as well and try to really show off the value of them serving at your host site. And then, as I mentioned, you'll want to decide on an application process. So each organization is going to be different on the route that they choose, but you'll want to decide, are they going to apply directly through your website or through your organization's process that they use for other employees, or will you go a different route, something simpler by just having candidates email a resume or cover letter. It's completely up to you on what that process will look like. And then similarly, how you choose to screen applicants and go through that interview process. You want to keep common interview questions to ensure fairness across all applicants, but that's also clearly noted in those member recruitment documents as well. And then ultimately, who's going to be involved in making that decision and choosing your candidate. It's really important that you take the time to really screen and interview your applicants, because you want to make sure you have a good fit, considering this member will be at your organization for a year. So you want to make sure that you go through the process and not just select the first person that comes through because you're so excited to get someone in. It's important to take the time and really get to know that person. So some ideas for marketing or how you can get your position and the word about it out there. Of course, post it on your website, social media, use all the different avenues that you have access to, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. If you have Snapchat or TikTok, kudos to you, because that tends to be where the younger generation are. But think about who's your ideal candidate and where would you find them. Those are the best places to start marketing and looking for candidates. Think about online job boards, utilizing your email lists that are already existing. So if you have newsletters or contact lists, those are a good way to get your position out. Even if that audience themselves isn't interested, maybe they have a friend or family member or know of another group that they can pass that information on to. So generally, the more people that know about AmeriCorps and know about the position, the more likely you are to find somebody. And so word of mouth can be one of the best recruitment strategies. If you have a board, make sure you want to mention it to your board members. Volunteers are always a great place to look for AmeriCorps members if they're looking for something more serious or more committed. A lot of times volunteers will step up and join to be an AmeriCorps member. So these are just a sample of ideas. So get back to your organization, do some brainstorming, and think about what would be the best use of your time and effort to ensure that you find an awesome AmeriCorps member. And as I was mentioning earlier, it is really important that you find a good fit for your organization. So these are some things that you'll really want to consider when you're interviewing and searching for a candidate. Not only are they a good fit, but are they fully committed? So this is a year-long term. So it's always a good idea to talk about their future plans, learn a little bit more about, do they have a family? Are they in school? What are their other commitments outside of this position? Because you want to make sure you take those into account to ensure that they are committed and not going to leave, after a few months when they find a better position or better role. And then another important question to screen for when you are interviewing is, can they meet all the AmeriCorps requirements? So the time commitment, the hours per week, any specific scheduling needs that you have as an organization. The more upfront you can be in that interview, the more likely you are to have success at retaining that AmeriCorps member. Make sure they can attend orientation and training. Um, just want to make sure that they have all the information that they need to fully commit to this type of position. And then very important, of course, is to be inclusive and provide equal opportunity. AmeriCorps members, come from all different backgrounds and age ranges and experiences, and they can all provide unique skills, and they're just all unique people. So I encourage you to be open-minded when you're interviewing and selecting your candidate.
And Megan, if you'll keep this slide up here, Lynn had a question about handshake specifically, being notified when someone expresses interest and that they get invited, the recipient is invited to contact them. Her question is, do you have a recommendation for effective follow-up? And I think this is where that initial screening process starts to take place. So these, I would follow up with them, and the more personal the contact, the better. If it's possible to reach them by phone, I think you'll be more effective than email. However, most tend to want to go the electronic route. But I would find out I would think about what were the really key qualifications you want. And that would be your first bullet point. Find out if they can, they have those skill sets that you're looking for. Commitment is going to be completely important. Their scheduling and other things that they might be juggling. Can they make the commitment for time, and also specifically the orientation, because especially if you're talking about students, we have a 5-day orientation and it's in the beginning of a new college semester. So they need to be comfortable with being able to juggle that.
And
I hope, go ahead.
One example that I'll quick jump in and provide for you, Lynn, I had somebody who reached out on Handshake last week, actually, just looking for more information. And this individual didn't know much about AmeriCorps, and so I directed them just to our website for some general information to start, and then followed up later just asking if there were any other questions that I could answer or any more information I could provide. And so started there as kind of a general, I guess, first step. And I think that sufficiently answered the person's questions. They were, turns out, from another state and the location wouldn't work out, but I felt was a good starting point for somebody on Handshake specifically.
Good points. And one thing that I'll add to kind of not only about how you would contact them, but just to emphasize the importance of following up as quickly as possible. So if somebody's interested, you want to make sure you're capturing them at the point of interest and not waiting days or a week later to follow up with them, because at that point they might have found something that they choose to go with instead of AmeriCorps. So the quicker and the more consistent you can be with following up with these candidates, the more likely you are to hook them in and get them to accept the position. Great question. And another question about, can you have physical requirements for the position? Oh, I skipped over a question too. I'll get back up to that one. Physical requirements for the position. Yes, so host sites are able to have any sort of qualifications beyond what AmeriCorps requires, which is just over the age of 17 and a US citizen. So you could require a specific degree, like a bachelor's degree, or a certain level of experience in a certain area, or these physical requirements as well. Just make sure you point that out and list that in your position description so that candidates are aware of that. And that's something that you'll want to screen for when you're interviewing to make sure that they can meet those requirements. And then back up to the question about seniors or retirees. Um, it's happened before, so we have AmeriCorps members of all ages. Generally, they tend to be, in the 20 to 30-year-old range, but I would say the best way to reach them would be find out where they are in your community. So if there's a senior center or a job center for that specific age range, maybe YMCAs or somewhere where seniors are hanging out or newly retired folks, and put up a flyer or start talking to some of these groups. Ask, these different community agencies or organizations if you can come in and talk to their group maybe after a certain community meeting. There's lots of different ways that you can try to reach the people, but it's best to go with where they're at and where they're hanging out.
I'm thinking about some of the seniors that we've enrolled. This particular term, we have very few seniors, but in other terms, we've had more. And I'm recalling how they had recruited those. And in a couple of the cases, they started by looking at their own active volunteers, people who are already engaged with the organization, and made personal invites and requests, and that's how those came about. One particular member had already served as a retiree in Peace Corps and was looking for something local in her community. So she just saw a posting that was put out on, I don't remember what the platform was. And we also have in communities RSVP programs, which is now it's called the AmeriCorps Senior Programs. And so if you're familiar with RSVP, they are just 55 and older volunteers serving in nonprofits all across the communities. So pretty much just your everyday volunteer, just happen to be 55 and older. That might be a place to put out a message to take their service one step further beyond connecting through RSVP, but take that extra commitment and be a regular AmeriCorps member as well.
And there's a question about being a legal permanent resident and whether or not they can apply for AmeriCorps. Shelley, do you mind answering that one since you're our enrollment expert?
Yeah, and that is also, those are eligible candidates as well. I put that in the chat.
Oh, perfect. All right. So maybe, and this has happened already, if you already have a member in mind or selected, what you'll need to do next is reach out to Shelley to get the recruitment process started. So it doesn't hurt to let us know as soon as you have someone secured. But don't panic if you don't have a member yet, because it's very early yet. But best place to start would be to reach out to Shelley. And some of you on the call are, well, a lot of you are returning host sites and have current members. So if your current member is coming back for a second term, just know that there is a slightly different and easier process for enrollment. And so they don't need to fill out an application or go through the background check process. So the best thing to do is email us, your program coordinator, or Shelley, and let us know that your member is going to be returning for a second term, and we'll help facilitate that process. But keep in mind that members can't serve or count any hours for the 2 weeks in between service terms. So August 31st to September 12th, there was no service allowed. So you will need to give them those 2 weeks off to get refreshed and reinvigorated for the next service term. So to sum up our recruitment tips, best to start early as soon as possible. 3 months seems like a long time, but the sooner you start, the more likely you are to find a awesome member. And make sure you're using multiple methods. So if you're just posting it on your employment site, you're less likely to find someone than if you are using all of the different avenues and strategies that we mentioned. And then important to just believe in what you are selling. So if you're passionate about the work and passionate about this position, try to convey that and show that when you're interviewing and talking about the position. Get people really excited to serve and be part of your organization for the next year. And then also being realistic and honest. So you are paying for this AmeriCorps member to serve at your site. The last thing you want to do is try to kind of manipulate or leave out details about the position and have them start and then not realize all of the expectations and then end up leaving the service term. We definitely don't want that to happen. So be honest and upfront when you're interviewing and what you are expecting of that member, whether that be the hours that they'll be working or the certain demand or level of work that you are expecting. And I'm going to go through some common recruitment questions quickly here. So we often get questioned, can a member be employed by your organization? The easy answer is no. AmeriCorps members are not allowed to be employed the same time that they are serving as an AmeriCorps member. There are very special and rare cases that we do allow this to happen, but it requires special approval from our state commission. So generally, it's not a good route to go. But if you really feel like this member would be great and they have a completely different role than they currently have at your organization, just reach out and we can have a conversation about it. Can a member also be a student? The answer is yes. But this is something that you'll want to make sure you have a big, solid conversation about when you're interviewing to ensure that they have the capacity and the work and organization to be able to manage both their student caseload or course load and then the AmeriCorps position. So generally, we don't recommend full-time members to also be full-time students. Of course, way too many hours, but potentially a half-time member and a full-time student with a lighter course load. So it's possible, but we have to be very mindful that they're not going to get overwhelmed with too many hours and too much to do at school.
Again, can we just pause for a second? Someone has a question that relates to number one up there about members being employed. Are independent contractors considered employees? These are 1099 independent contractors. So yeah, I think it doesn't, if the organization is paying them, I don't think it matters whether they're independent contractors or not. Am I right?
Correct. Yes. Because they're both being paid out of the same payroll system, likely. So that's where it becomes not allowed. Good
Well,
question.
Marshall Clinic pays the member.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
so, but I think if you are paying them, then we view you as being their employer. This question really hasn't ever come up, and there might be some legal differences about employment and independent contractors that I'm just not knowledgeable about. So I guess I don't want to, maybe we can look into that and get back to you, Evan.
Okay, yeah, never mind. I have more questions specific to that, but
Okay.
if it's better for an email at a different time or a phone call, that would be great.
Sure. And I think what AmeriCorps is concerned about is that the average recipient of your services at your organization would not be able to differentiate when that person is serving as an AmeriCorps member or when they are an independent contractor. And there needs to be very clear differences, like what they're doing and how, even like they would never have branding on. And so that's why it gets sticky. And as a general rule, we say don't use employees. as members, but
Okay.
yeah, we'll follow
Yeah.
up.
Sounds good.
All right, and then the last couple questions here. What if you don't find the right member, which happens? There's good, well, if you don't find a member, that's okay, because if we haven't filled all of our member positions, we often do a second round of member recruitment and enrollment that starts in January. So we will open it up again so you can essentially continue recruiting, but then your member won't start till January. And then in January, we would offer half-time and three-quarter time positions. So you can't find the right member. There's still potentially an opportunity if we don't have all of our spots filled. So it's nothing to worry about, but if you get to a point when you're struggling in this process, don't hesitate to reach out to us before we get to the application deadline, because we can help brainstorm and troubleshoot to see if there's anything that we can do to help to ensure that you find the best member. Number 4, we already answered about additional qualifications. Yes, you can require those. And then what happens if you receive an application or you're interviewing a candidate that's not a good fit for your organization, but they're really passionate, they want to serve in AmeriCorps, and they're looking for other positions potentially? The best thing you should do is send them our way, give them our, or pass over their resume or their information. We'll reach out to them, learn more about them, and see if we can pass them off to a different host site or a different organization that might be a better fit. So sharing is caring. If you're not going to be selecting someone, but you think they might be a good fit somewhere else, we'll help facilitate and make sure that person can get an interview elsewhere.
Can I just share a question that got answered in the chat, but for those who are listening to the recording, they'll never see these, I don't think. There was a question if a less than full-time member can serve fewer hours in the fall and then more hours later. And the answer is yes. When we have a position less than full-time, there is flexibility, and you would work that out with your member. As long as it's agreeable to both parties, you can have them work differing amounts of time. What is important, what marks success, is if they reach that minimum total hours by August 31st. How you get there is between you and the member.
I have a follow-up question for that as well. We applied for full-time, but we're not 100% certain if the work that we would have for them would necessarily meet the full-time. Say they get to the end of the year and it's more of a three-quarter, I mean, I don't know specifically how it will pan out, but is there can things be dialed back to a three-quarter? How does that work? Do they have to meet that full-time if they start out full-time, or how does that work?
There is a cutoff, so we would only be able to make a change within 90 days of their start date. So that is something that we'd have to identify early on, but we hope that we don't get in that situation, because ideally, if the member is interested in a full-time opportunity, we want to be able to provide them with full-time service. So it does happen, but it would have to be made within 90 days. And then we make that change. But generally, we encourage you to think about now, how many hours per week do you really need at your host site, and then recruit for that specific position type.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so you get through this recruitment process and you found an awesome member that you would like to sign on as your AmeriCorps member. What do you do next? Make sure you notify us and let us know so that we can start the enrollment process. So send us an email, and this is all outlined in those recruitment documents. Send us an email and say, hey, we found this awesome member, and his or her or their name is blah, blah, blah. And they're going to be serving as list their position type, so we know in case, like Evan, you applied for a full-time member, maybe they're going to be three-quarter time. Make sure you let us know what their position type is, and then we'll start the enrollment process and do any necessary follow-up. And then the fun doesn't stop there once you have your member selected, because you'll want to start thinking about your orientation plan. Because in 3 weeks, potentially on when you have your member identified, in 3 weeks they'll be starting at your organization. So what sort of training might this member need? Is there any equipment or supplies that they need to order? Who's going to be there to meet this member on the first day? Those are all sorts of things that you'll want to start thinking about once you have that member secured. And then important to stay connected with your member, especially if you find them early on this summer. Don't hesitate to reach out and just let them know how excited you are that they're going to be serving at your site. Because if they go months without hearing from you, they might get nervous and tempted to find a different opportunity elsewhere. So we do our best to stay connected with them, but we hope that you will make an effort to as well.
Again, from the chat, there was a good question about health insurance. So full-time and three-quarter-time members are eligible to enroll in health insurance if they don't already carry health insurance. And that is for the member only, not for families. And then Gary had a question that was easier to answer, I think, out loud. He had a member in the past, and he's wondering if there are still times set aside for the AmeriCorps members for orientation, to attend orientation, and for AmeriCorps programming. So we'll provide you with a calendar up front that identifies all of the AmeriCorps requirements and also optional AmeriCorps trainings as we know when we get started. And so we would ask that you would allow and plan for those in your schedule with the member. A great activity right off the bat is for them to put all those calendar items right in your calendar and their calendar in that first week on the site so that they don't get lost. And AmeriCorps members typically need maybe 1, 2, 3 hours every week just for desk time to do things like timesheets. At the end of 4 times a year, they have to do some reflection activities and report on volunteer management that they're doing. So those sorts of activities do take a little bit of time. We occasionally send surveys out or just to respond to emails that may be coming out or to ask questions. So it's important that we do have monthly team meetings scheduled on the first Thursday of every month. Little over an hour is all, so those are kind of sacred times, but beyond that, everything else is a little bit more variable as to when they come. And as I said, as we know, we add them to a calendar and make that available for everyone.
And I'll point out a comment Lynn put in the chat, but you're not able to start any training before the start date. So I mentioned, stay connected with your member, but you can't say, hey, complete this online training or start doing this, work or service, because they can't count any hours until they start on September 11th and they're officially enrolled. So avoid badgering them too much beyond any initial orientation or requirements that your host site may need to employ or get them through the HR screening process. Good point, Lynn.
And this is because those hours, those training hours, all can count towards. That's why we should wait.
Yes. Yep. All those
Okay.
training hours count. So anything that they do for your site prior to that start date, they'll be doing as a volunteer or on their own time. So that's up to them. If they want to, they're more than welcome to, but they can't count those hours then towards their AmeriCorps hours.
Okay. Sounds good.
In some instances, if you really needed that member to be on board, maybe there was special training that your organization was offering that was key for them to receive, you can employ them before their service as a temporary employee with a cutoff of, before their start date, and, make an arrangement to offer them some sort of monetary incentive to come if you'd like. It happens rarely, but that's allowable.
All right, and then this is the last slide before we open it up to questions, because I know we are on time here, but the important date on this slide is that August 16th. So that is when you need to have your member selected by. That is a hard deadline just because of the extensive AmeriCorps enrollment process. We risk losing a member if we don't have them started with enrollment by August 16th. So we'll keep you updated throughout the summer on where we're at with recruitment and reminders and be there to help you along the way. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you need help or support. That's what we're here for, is to provide technical assistance and make sure that you all find members. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
I have a question, please. Hello again.
Yep, go ahead, Gary.
So one, I did not get the materials because again, I get that thing that it's not a secured site. So I sent you that message. So if you could send me the information you sent in that link via email, that'd be greatly appreciated. So again, for the full-time hours, it's 1,700 hours, correct?
Correct.
And then they are done by, I think you said August 30th. Is that correct?
August 31st is the last day, unless they complete their hours
Beforehand.
sooner. They can complete more than 1,700, so they're more than welcome to serve up until that date, but they have to get all of those hours in by the 31st.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Other questions?
Does a returning member attend orientation their second year? Yes.
What is the total number of years that a member could renew?
They can serve a total of 4 terms. So whether that be 4 full-time terms or 4 half-time terms, they're capped at 4 terms, but they'll only receive an education award for 2 full-time terms. So once they get into their 3rd and 4th term, they no longer receive that education award. But we have members that definitely go on to 3rd and 4th terms.
Right.
If their first 2 terms were half term, they would still get an ed award terms 3 and maybe 4. Yeah.
To follow up with Gary, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just following up with, oh, geez. Oh, you go, Lynn.
Go ahead, Evan.
Okay, just following up with Gary's, there's that they will only be paid as much as is listed as that number 20, whatever, and they have to meet within those hours. What if they go above those hours? That's not going to be compensated, correct?
Correct. They're paid
Okay.
bi-weekly, no matter how many hours they serve. So if they serve beyond the 17, they will continue to receive that stipend through the 31st. And then, like Shelley was kind of alluding to before, if they serve 20 hours one week and 60 hours the next week, they're still paid that consistent stipend. And then if they would finish early, say they get their 1,700 hours in and it's July, they want to exit, they can exit, but they're not, then they're going to stop receiving that living stipend and then receive, shy of that full amount.
Okay.
So the stipend is not tied to hours.
Got it.
I just want to clarify what I thought you said was, if the person is half-time for 1 or 2 years, they can still get the education award for a half-time person.
Yeah, so you can get the an equivalent of 2 full-time ed awards. So if you do 4 half-time terms,
Okay.
you've used up all 4 terms and you've used the 2
Okay.
full ed awards. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that wasn't clear to me. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you clarified that.
Even we get confused with that, Lynn, sometimes. All the AmeriCorps requirements.
And
Great questions, everyone.
those stacked, so the 4 terms allowed, is that for the member just in general as far as being in AmeriCorps or just at a specific organization?
In AmeriCorps, yeah. We
Okay.
kind of feel like that's a rule that has little significance anymore. Maybe at 30 years ago when AmeriCorps started, it was an in-demand position and we didn't want the same individuals snagging all the positions. Clearly, when we're holding webinars on how to recruit a member, that's not the case, but all of AmeriCorps rules are actually part of federal legislation. It takes an act of Congress to change them. So
Oh,
if we wanted to change that, well, we know how easy it is to work with Congress these days, right?
yeah.
And keep in mind the goal of AmeriCorps and our Community
Mhm.
Corps program is this is supposed to be a stepping stone for them or potentially or an experience. It's not
Mhm.
meant to be a career, and that's why the living stipend is a little bit lower because it's not meant to be, something that you do for years and years. It's meant to be an experience or a stepping stone to a further career. So we hope that they find benefit and then move on to do something awesome. Maybe even get employed at your host site, which happens.
Yes, we hired ours last time we had one. So, so a question again. So when they're doing their AmeriCorps programming, is that still that's part of their 1,700 hours of their full time?
Correct.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So then, like when I'm looking at the schedule and I see that they begin their orientation on the 11th, technically they started their program hours then on the September 11th with you folks doing their AmeriCorps orientation. Okay.
Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out, did you go 40, for example, which gives them like 41 weeks of time, or do you go like 32, which gives them 52 weeks of time, or 53 weeks of time? So I'm just trying to figure that out as far as for the balance. So
And time off is often a question that we get too. We cover this in site supervisor training. But time off is really between you and the member, as long as they're able to meet their 1,700 hours and it works with your schedule, the member can take off time however they're able to get in their hours. So it just depends on how many hours they're serving per week, how much time off they may need, and how flexible you are with your scheduling.
and then what about holidays? Is there an expectation that their holidays are paid time or not paid time?
Well, since pay is not tied to hours, they get the same stipend if a holiday falls in there or not.
Okay,
So
got it. Okay,
But if they're, not
but
serving on that day, they may only
day,
get
yes,
32 hours in that week.
got it.
So then they'll have to, make up that time if they're shooting for a certain average hours per week. But
Okay,
generally and that's why we say 35 to 40 hours per week, because it actually averages out to just over 34 hours per week
mhm,
if they serve that every week. So if you factor in holiday, some time off, you can, maintain that 40-hour per week and they'll still get about 2 weeks of vacation
yeah,
time.
yeah, because I know for us, local government, I mean, we're like Thanksgiving, that's 2 days, Christmas, that's 2 days. So just trying to figure those holidays in. So, okay, thank you.
In regards to benefits, not necessarily benefits, but like you guys are providing to the member, you're providing them the ability to have health insurance, dental insurance. What about, and you guys are handling all the payroll and background checks. Um, how is workman's comp? How does that work?
Great
Like,
question.
are we required to carry workers' comp on them, or will you guys carry that, or
We
how does that work?
carry it through Marshfield Clinic, so that is something that you don't have to worry about. If
Okay.
a member is injured at your site, there's a process and a policy, but they contact us and they go through our Marshfield Clinic workers' comp. So that's a benefit to you as a host site
Okay.
for sure.
And then you guys were, there's something in here about, so I'm our host supervisor. Um, and so there's also mention of a program manager, provided by Marshfield Clinic. What does that relationship between us as the host site, the member, and you guys as the AmeriCorps facilitator or whatever that's considered?
So we have you said program manager, how, I forget how we titled that, but essentially we have a staff person. So Shelly and Allison are both on the call here, and we split up our members. So you have a specific Marshall Clinic employee that's assigned to you and your member, and their goal is to make sure that you get what you need and the member gets what they need. So we're really facilitators, moderators. We're there for technical assistance. So we'll step in if you need to. You know, they'll be checking in, making sure, you know, and the member knows about upcoming trainings and requirements. But we're really there for support.
Okay. Good.
I don't know if Shelly or Allison, if you want to chime in more about your duties or role, but that's how I think of it.
Nope, I think that pretty much covers it. Shelly and I divide up our members, and we, like Megan said, we kind of oversee everything, make sure that they are on track with their hours, making sure that their timesheets are being submitted. So you will likely hear from your program director, and the AmeriCorps member will hear from the program director even more.
Okay. Sounds good.
And our primary method of contact is email. So we do also phone calls, but we do very few site visits. Maybe that would change, but at this time, we don't really have the opportunity, the staff time to be able to do that.
Okay. Yeah, because I was curious as to how, you know, how that relationship worked, and that makes sense.
So
Am I the only one on the call? Okay, I see other people.
Orientation and any of our in-person trainings become really important because day to day they're with you and they really affiliate, and their experience in AmeriCorps will depend on the relationship and experience that you help them achieve. So it's very important for us to be able to bond with them and connect with them as much as possible in the few times that we are able to pull the groups together. And then it's pretty much emails. And I mean, you can get chatty on an email and build a relationship, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, because my understanding of how this was going. So for us, we're a nonprofit serving people with disabilities, primarily with summer camp programs, but we do a lot of other programming. And so we were viewing recruitment. And the reason I asked the independent contractor question is because currently we have an internship program where college age or gap, you know, post high school, they come on for a year doing a year-long internship, or they come through us through summer camp first and then stay on for your internship. And so they fundraise for their living expenses. And so this was, we know a few other people who are participating in AmeriCorps. And so we saw this as a potential for, okay, well, maybe that's a way they can receive compensation without having to do fundraising, or, you know, and so when we have a talk a different time, those are the sort of things that I'd like to go into a little more detail and get more questions answered.
Is that internship through like a Title IV school, institution of higher ed, or it's?
No,
Okay.
it is. We just call it an internship, as
Sure.
it is a temporary position at our organization.
Yeah, we'd be happy to talk to you more, Evan. We can always set up a time to chat and answer through some of those scenarios and questions.
And we'll
Sounds
include
good.
you, Lynn, because that was a topic you were also interested in.
All right, we're coming up on 4 o'clock. I know I scheduled this for 45 minutes, but there's been so many great questions. I appreciate everyone hanging out and asking all of these awesome questions. I will hang out a little bit longer, but you are welcome to sign up if you have another meeting to go to. But just really appreciate your attention, your questions, and excited for this upcoming term. So good luck with recruitment. And like I said, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.